All right, thank you, Mr. Baylor. Please be seated. All right, we concluded our mid-morning recess. At this time then, Detective Wheeler's still on the stand, still under oath for his testimony. And this will be the time for cross-examination. When you get to any exhibits, we did discuss those in the sidebar. And Mr. Pryor, you can just move for admissions of any exhibits you have with this cross-examination. So,
and Judge, by stipulation of the parties are stipulating to Defense Exhibit 63, which represents the body cam of Officer Wheeler, which I don't think has been brought up yet.
all right, Exhibit 63 was clarified. It is not the same as what we previously said was 300B. So 63 is a new exhibit, and I understand the state's reviewed that. Is there any objection to Exhibit 63 being admitted? All right, Exhibit 63 is admitted then. Mr. Pryor, you can commence with your cross.
And Judge, at the appropriate time, I'll ask permission to publish when I get to that point.
Very well.
Officer Wheeler, I just want to clarify a couple of things if we could.
Yep.
I want to clarify your role from the morning when you arrived at 7 a.m. and your testimony is you did arrive at about 7 a.m. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And then what was your role immediately at 7 a.m.?
So I assisted in securing the front roadway that goes in front of the property, 1900 East. And then just assisting with any crowd control and traffic control at that intersection in that road.
Okay. Was there a significant crowd there at that point?
No, there had not been right at 7.
Okay. And approximately how many officers were there at the time?
I can't testify to that.
Okay. You did say multiple agencies, right?
Correct.
Those agencies would include the FBI,
Yes.
the Rexburg Police Department,
Yes.
the Fremont County Police Department,
Sheriff's Office.
Sheriff's Office. Give me Sheriff's Office. Yes. Madison County as well.
I don't recall seeing any Madison County to my knowledge.
Okay. Any other citizens there other than law enforcement who were present that you recognized
Not on the property, no.
on the 9th?
Not on that. Nope.
Okay. Okay. Now, your duties at the time back on this date of 2020, what was your primary job other than this working on this case at that time?
I was a sergeant in patrol, so helping with scheduling, shift coverage.
So you would also go out on patrol and you would do, that was part of your role, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And and at the time, you were, this is where I'm a little confused. At the time you were with the Rexburg Police Department or were you with a different agency?
Rexburg Police Department.
Okay. And as part of your duties, as part of your role as a sergeant, supervisory role, you had a vehicle with a camera inside, right?
Yes.
And the camera also videotaped outside, is that right?
Yes.
And as part of your role in a supervisory position with the Rexburg Police Department, you also carried a body cam, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And it was standard for you to carry a body cam as part of your role as in a supervisory position, is that right?
For patrol, yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, in describing Fremont County, that's a rural part of town out near Mr. Daybell's place. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, from 7 o'clock until what time did you leave your role as your supervisory position in overseeing the comings and goings of people going onto the property?
I would say when I was asked to make the traffic stop.
So in other words, you were you were there at 7 a.m. And when you made the traffic stop, and again, what time was that?
Believe it was approximately 11:20 a.m.
Okay, so you were there for approximately 4 hours and 20 minutes, your role was to supervise the outside of the property there and obviously keep an eye on Mr. Daybell, right?
Correct.
Okay. And from 7 o'clock until 11 o'clock, again, tell me where Mr. Daybell's whereabouts were?
So initially, he got into his car, moved it to the west side of his home in the driveway. Later took it over to the house kitty corner from his property, and then left southbound on 1900 East.
Okay, so from the time he parked the car in the driveway, how long did he sit in the driveway?
This would be an estimation,
Oh, that's-
approximately an hour, 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay, so and I'm not going to hold you to this.
Yeah.
7 to 8 o'clock is fair for him being in the driveway.
He didn't exit the house till 7:30
Okay, 7 to 8:30 in the driveway?
approximately.
And then you saw him get in his car, and you said that the tail end was backed into the garage, right?
At his property, yes.
So the tail end of his vehicle was to the back where the garage is.
Correct.
And how far from the back of the garage was Mr. Daybell's bumper? Can you tell me?
I couldn't.
Was it close? Was it far?
To the garage?
Yeah.
Back bumper to the garage?
Yeah.
I know you could walk between it.
You could walk between it.
Yes.
So there wasn't 30 feet, but it was closer to just a couple of feet to get behind.
I can't testify to that.
You don't remember?
I don't remember.
Okay, that's okay. So then approximately about 8:30, you saw the car exit and he drove over to Emma's place. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. Did he have any contact with law enforcement up until that time?
he had.
He had?
Yes.
Do you know who spoke with him?
I don't know everybody that spoke to him when they made contact inside the home originally.
So at some point, he was advised that they found remains on his property. When did that take place?
That didn't take place to my knowledge until he was stopped on a traffic stop.
Oh, okay. So and this is where I'm kind of confused. And please, educate me a little bit. So you said that Mr. Daybell was in Emma's house, his daughter's house, for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And while he was in the house, you didn't see him try to run away or flee or do anything like that, right?
Correct.
He didn't have any knowledge of anything going on out on his property other than there were multiple police officers out there, right?
I can't testify to that. I don't know what he could see from that home.
Well, as a patrol officer, you understand, and as a sergeant, you understand that when someone is stopped for a traffic ticket, there's a certain amount of anxiety with people when that happens to them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And would you agree then that if there are 30 plus police officers showing up at your property and looking all over your property outside, not inside, but outside, would that tend to think that maybe you're a little curious about what's going on your property?
It could.
And that doesn't mean that you're guilty of anything. That doesn't mean you have any knowledge. What that means is you're curious about why are there 30 officers wandering around my property? Wouldn't you agree with that?
That could be the case.
Okay, thank you. So then when Mr. Daybell left Emma's house, it's your testimony that he sped off. Is that what your testimony was?
I believe it appeared that he was speeding.
It appeared he was speeding. Okay. So he doesn't have any knowledge about what's going on the property at that point, right?
No, I don't know that.
Okay,
don't know what
he hasn't been told by anybody from the law enforcement agency that that they found something on his property. Is that fair?
Not that I was aware of.
Okay. And then in your testimony, and maybe he wasn't speeding, maybe he was going fast. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, so he wasn't racing off then, correct?
He accelerated quicker than,
Okay. And the speed limit on Salem Highway, and I've been on there a couple of times, is about 50 miles an hour. Starts slow, Yeah, but when you get right on Salem Highway, it's a 50-mile-an-hour road.
Council's testifying.
Okay, I'll ask him, Judge Ensign.
Hold on. Again, when there's an objection, I don't want an immediate argument back. I want a moment to rule, and that objection is overruled.
Okay,
So you can re-ask and the officer can answer if he knows, knowing he's a law enforcement officer in the
Okay.
area.
do you have knowledge of what the speed limit is on Salem Highway in front of Mr. Daybell's house?
50 miles an hour.
Okay, so 50 miles an hour. So if you're pulling out of a driveway and Emma's where she used to live is right on Salem Highway, right?
Correct.
So it wouldn't be unusual for someone to pull into traffic and start accelerating into going down the road, right?
No,
Okay. Now, I saw on the body cam, did you have a chance to go look over your body cam?
yes,
Okay, and when did you review that?
couple days ago. I don't remember
Okay,
the date.
now I saw on the body cam, and if we have to, we'll play this for everybody to, if you have trouble remembering something, but I saw on the body cam where you pull up and Mr. Daybell stopped in a vehicle and you get out of the vehicle. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And then you walked up to, it looked like there were about 4 or 5 officers there, right?
I know that there were 2 unmarked surveillance officers that were there with me at that time.
Okay, but Officer Hermosillo was there.
He arrived shortly after,
Officer Ball was there.
arrived shortly after.
And as soon as they arrived and you walked up, there was a discussion to Mr. Daybell about where he was going. Do you remember that?
I don't recall that.
Did you have a discussion that he was going to visit somebody that morning?
I did not.
Did he have a discussion about having a meeting with his lawyer that morning?
Not to my,
Remember that?
not to my knowledge.
Okay. So you have no recollection of the discussion of anyone at that point pointing out to Mr. Daybell that he can't go see his lawyer, the lawyer can come to him?
I do recall overhearing a statement about his lawyer.
Okay, so now you remember the statement about the lawyer. So gleaming from that statement, you were to understand that Mr. Daybell was in the process of going to see his lawyer, right?
No,
Okay. Judge, I'm going to ask to publish the body cam that's been previously admitted into evidence, and I'll see if I can get this to go.
And that'll be Exhibit 63.
Yes, Your Honor.
There's pretty dogs coming through, I believe, with on the follow tape.
What do we got? Do we know what we have?
I don't know what they want. They said,
Yeah, go ahead and step out here for us. They just asked us to stop you, so just come right here. They're gonna come and chat with you, okay? Just stand right here. You don't have anything on you? No weapons or nothing?
okay, Chad, we were communication. So we're going to detain you for a minute. We'll figure out what we're going to do. Well, your attorney can now come to you.
Okay. So it's difficult to hear Mr. Daybell, but he commented to the officer when the officer inquired, what he was doing. Do you now recall that?
I couldn't hear what
Okay.
he said.
But the officer's response to Mr. Daybell was, now your lawyer can come to see you. Did you recognize that?
Yes,
Which officer, by the way, said that?
I believe that was Lieutenant Ball.
Okay, so Lieutenant Ball is the one who said, your officer can come to you now. Is that fair? Your
Attorney,
lawyer can come to you now.
yes,
Okay. So it appears that Mr. Daybell was in the process of going to see his lawyer that morning.
I can't testify to that.
Right. But according to Lieutenant Ball's comment, your lawyer can come to you now. It sort of presumes that, doesn't it?
I could presume that he was trying to call or wanted to talk to his attorney first.
Okay, and he was doing that in his car as he was driving away, right?
I don't know that.
Or he was doing that driving down the road instead of spending another hour in his house with Emma, talking to his lawyer on the phone. He chose to instead, well, I'll just get in the car and,
Objection, Your Honor, it's calling for speculation.
Sustained.
and then after that point, you put Chad into handcuffs, right?
Yes,
Put him in the back of your car.
yes,
And that was the video that we observed with Mr. Wixom, correct?
correct.
Okay. Now, do you recall Mr. Daybell on the video that you looked at with Mr. Wixom, where Mr. Daybell mentions, I don't know what they're charging me with? Do you record him saying that?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you also record him, or also recall him, excuse me, saying to Emma, cooperate as much as you feel. Remember Emma saying that?
yes.
Okay. At what point during that process was Mr. Daybell advised that they found a body on his property?
Right prior to this clip right here.
Okay. And at that, so at the point that he was having a discussion with his daughter Emma, at that point, he didn't know what he was being charged with, correct?
Not to my knowledge,
Nobody told him what he was being charged with, correct?
not to my knowledge.
But it's a pretty serious allegation if you get put in a set of handcuffs and put behind a van, and then suddenly they say, we found a body on your property, right?
Could you repeat the question?
That's a pretty serious allegation.
Yes,
In your traffic experience, that's not something that happens every day, right?
right,
So at that point, Mr. Daybell is put in the back of the car, Chad's put in the back of the car, and Emma was allowed to talk with him, right?
correct.
So we don't know what was going on in Mr. Daybell's mind, do we?
I don't.
Right. And we don't know what he's thinking, right?
Right.
But we do know that he's been told, guess what? They found a body on your property, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you're in handcuffs, right?
Correct.
And then Mr. Daybell says, we're going to make it through this, right?
Yes, sir.
And he's talking to his daughter about financial, where he can come up with money, credit cards, business accounts that he has, things like that, correct?
They were discussing those.
Right. So the purpose of discussing that, we don't know whether he was doing that to try to figure out a way if he could post bond on a release after he's being accused of this, right?
I don't know that.
You don't know that, right? We don't know what the reason for him trying to get his financials in order, right?
Right.
Now, I want to go back to the driveway. And originally, Chad was parked in a driveway from the south side. There's a driveway that comes in through the south, right?
Yeah, southeast of the residence.
Southeast of the residence. A long driveway that gets right into the middle of the, what I would call the backyard, the lawn area of the yard, right?
Correct.
Okay, now that's where he originally was parked, correct?
Yes,
And would you agree with me that parked in that location gives you the best view of the fire pit and the pond?
I don't know about the pond because there was a shed there, but the fire pit.
Clearly the fire pit, right?
Correct.
And you don't know about the pond because the pond is off back on a portion of the property set back a little further, right?
Correct.
And it's a distance to see it, correct? That'd be fair, wouldn't it? Fair?
Distance is pretty relative, I guess.
Okay. Well, how far from where Mr. Daybell was parked to looking at the tree where they found JJ's remains?
I couldn't testify to an exact
Okay.
distance.
All right, fair enough. It's a distance though. This isn't his backyard, right?
You could see it easily,
Okay, you could see it easily from that location where he was.
distance wise, that amount of distance.
Okay, but the remains of both of these children were found in the pasture area, right?
Yes,
So if we say what I'm talking about, the backyard, would you agree with me that the backyard is where this driveway is and where the lawn is? That would be really the backyard. Would you agree with that?
that's landscaped as grass, yes.
Right, okay, and then beyond a fence is the fire pit, and then further down off in the far, which would be the northeast corner, is a tree with a pond back some ways away from the house, right?
To the north of the fire pit.
Right. So this is what I'm struggling with. This is where I'm having some difficulty. If you have such a good view of the fire pit and the pond with the tree where JJ was found, if your purpose is to observe and see what's going on for some nefarious reason, why would he move?
I believe he was advised to, so they could get crime scene stuff in and out of that driveway.
Okay, so he was told he had to get out of there.
I believe so.
Okay, do you know who told him that?
I don't.
Okay. So then he drives out and goes in front of the house in the driveway.
Correct.
There's no other place to go. He has to go in the driveway, right?
If he wants to remain at the house, yes.
Right. And it's your testimony that he was looking around a little bit at that point, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, you know, he wasn't emotional at that point, right?
I didn't have a good vantage point to
Okay.
determine that.
He didn't have a look of fear on his face at that point. Is that right?
Not that I could see.
Okay. He didn't have a look of nervousness or tension or anything like that, did he?
I believe that he did
You believe he did?
Yes.
Are you basing that on him turning his head and looking around?
multiple times.
Okay, how many times is multiple?
There was 4 or 5, and then him exiting the vehicle.
Okay, okay. So if someone is on your property and there are 30 police officers digging around on your property, you don't think someone would be curious about what's going on your property?
That's why I said that I believe he was nervous.
Okay, he was curious.
It could be both, yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay. But then he didn't run at that point, right?
No,
He went over to his daughter's, right?
correct.
And he was there for an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, right?
Correct.
And then we just saw the video. He got accelerated a little bit, 50 miles an hour on Salem Highway. And when he stopped, he was planning on going to see his lawyer, right?
I don't know that.
Okay. Well, why would Lieutenant Ball say he's going to have to come to you? Was that
Calls
just
for
what he-
speculation, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Lieutenant Ball said to him, your lawyer's going to have to come to you, right?
Something along those lines, yes.
So there was at least a discussion about going to see the lawyer, right?
I don't know that.
Okay. You just think that was a statement Lieutenant Ball would just throw out there?
Judge, this has been asked and answered. It's pure speculation. The witness doesn't know.
I'll move on, Judge.
Well, again, I'd like to be allowed a chance to rule on that, and it is sustained as asked and answered. So do move on, Mr. Pryor.
Now, after you put Chad in the back of the car and what we talked about with Emma, talking about the finances, and there was a time when Emma made a comment that I can tell by your expression that you didn't know what was going on out there, something to that effect. You remember hearing that?
Yes,
Okay, and you saw Chad's eyes when they talked about the body and his expression. So he had a reaction to that surprise. Would you agree with that?
I couldn't see that.
Okay. But obviously we have the video and we can make our own determination at some point, right?
Sure.
What the reaction was when he's told about a body that was being found. Okay. So then subsequent to that time, after Emma left, if you look at the outside camera of the premises, Chad at one point, you talked about this looked back, right? And you said that was towards the fire pit, right?
There were multiple times that he looked back towards that area, yes.
But if he was looking back, if you look at the position of the car, isn't it true that he was actually looking back at his daughter walking away and Officer Dave Hope behind the vehicle?
I don't know.
You don't know
Where-
what he was looking at?
No, I don't know where Emma was at. She lives in front of the vehicle, so I don't know why she would be behind it.
Okay, and then the video speaks for itself, though, as to what exactly Chad was looking at, right?
It shows what direction he was looking at.
Okay, on the outside body, the outside cam of your vehicle, right?
In the front, I don't know what outside cam you're talking
The
about.
camera that was recording the encounter from the outside of your vehicle.
My body cam,
No, there were two cameras there.
the
There was
front car camera,
a front car camera, and then there was the one inside the car as well, right?
correct.
Okay. But the cameras will speak to themselves as to where Chad was looking, right?
Yes,
Okay. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be mistaken, but I thought you previously testified that by looking straight out the window, the way Chad's vehicle was positioned, that looking straight out the driver's or the passenger side window or the window he was in would be right directly at the fire pit. Isn't that what you testified to?
his residence.
Okay. So you're telling me that by looking behind or back, he's looking away from his residence. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. So again, what time did you drop Chad off at the jail?
Believe it was approximately 12:45.
Okay. And I just need to clarify something else. Have you been on that property before?
Prior to that day?
Yeah.
No,
Okay. All right. But you saw cadaver dogs there on that day?
yes.
Okay. And again, what time did you get back from after you dropped Chad off?
Back to the residence approximately 13:30, 1:30.
And for those of us who aren't in the military,
Sorry,
that'd be 1:30, right?
approximately 1:30 PM. Yeah.
Okay. I can do that math, I think. And then you were there until what time at night?
I don't recall the exact time until we decided to
Okay.
convene till the next day.
And your primary goal at that point was excavation, is that right?
After I had returned, they reassigned me to help with the property.
Okay, and what role specifically? Were you at the fire pit or were you at the tree back behind the pasture there?
Primarily the fire pit area.
Okay, and do you recall who was with you at the fire pit?
There were multiple people.
When you say multiple, how many are we talking about?
I don't even want to estimate.
That many?
There was people coming and going.
Oh,
So I don't
okay.
recall who was there and when.
And they were handing off the shovels and the tools used to do that?
Not necessarily handing them off, maybe expanding areas to look at and sift through.
And at one time, how many people would you say were digging around the fire pit with you?
I don't want to testify to that. I don't know.
You don't want to testify or you don't know?
I don't know. I don't know for sure how many.
Was it more than 2?
Yes,
Was it more than 4?
yes.
Was it more than 8?
I don't know.
Okay, and were you using just shovels?
No, they had sifters, hand tools, shovels.
So shovels, sifters, hand tools, anything else, or is that it?
Not that I can recall.
Other than digging in the dirt in the fire pit, was there any other obstruction in the fire pit that you recall having difficulty with?
Repeat that question.
Any difficulty in digging in the soil when you were at the fire pit?
Where we found Tylee's
Yes,
remains.
where Tylee's remains were found.
Just how careful we wanted to be.
Okay. So there were no boards, there were no obstructions, there were no rocks or anything like that. It was soil that you had to dig through. Is that fair?
There was some clumps of rock or hard.
Yeah, but nothing else, just small clumps?
Not that I recall.
Okay, and were you there primarily for a significant amount of the time of the excavation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. And Judge, I think that's all I have. I think that's all I have at this point.
All right, if we could have the published exhibit removed from the screen there, Mr. Pryor. Did we note on the record the time frame stamp of when that stopped? We may not have.
109, 103, it looks like, Judge.
Okay,
A
thank you.
minute 3 is, looks like when it was stopped is what I look like I have, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll let council return then and we'll have redirect Mr. Wixom.
Detective Wheeler, you were asked several questions by Mr. Pryor about, in your experience, different reactions that people have in terms of levels of nervousness.
Yes.
And he asked you a question about whether or not someone might typically get nervous with a simple traffic stop. Correct. Answer that. Can you just explain, is that your common experience as a law enforcement?
Yes, I think that most people do get a little nervous when they get stopped by police.
Yeah. In your experience, when someone's about to have a serious crime such as bodies on their property found, would they normally get nervous?
I would assume, yes.
Would they be curious and looking back at the property where the bodies were buried?
Yes.
So if
Officer,
they
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just speak more directly?
I'm
into the
sorry.
mic? We
Yep.
kind of moved over and we're
Sorry.
not getting your signal.
In your experience, Detective Wheeler, if someone is about to be discovered in a crime, about to be caught in a crime, have you ever experienced someone just acknowledging that and just surrendering because they know they're caught?
It is common for suspects when confronted with possibly getting caught to try to distance themselves from whatever they're getting.
What? Let me ask it a different way. So, have you ever experienced a situation where evidence was being found immediately and the reaction of the suspect was just to accept it and not resist or argue or react in any way? Judge, this,
Overruled.
go ahead now. Ask
Will
your question,
you
please.
repeat that question?
Have you ever, in your experience as a law enforcement officer, ever been in a situation where evidence was about to be discovered that incriminated the suspect and they just reacted calmly without any nervousness and just basically acquiesced?
Very few times.
But it has happened?
Yes.
Mr. Pryor asked a question about when Mr. Daybell was looking back at the property and he was looking curiously. Do you remember that question?
Correct.
Would you say that another reason why someone might be curious about all these law enforcement digging on your property could be that you were aware they're about to find bodies that you knew were buried on your property? Could that cause curiosity?
Yes.
Mr. Pryor asked you a question about the speed in the roadway in front of Mr. Daybell's property. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. And again, what was the speed on that road?
50 miles an hour.
And I think you testified that it may not be abnormal for someone living on that street. to drive out into the street and then quickly accelerate to 50 miles an hour or more.
Correct.
Would you disagree that someone who believed that bodies that were buried on his property might be a reason, in addition to that, why they might quickly get on the roadway and drive away quickly and accelerate like you've talked about?
Yes.
There's been some discussion as well. There's some questions from Mr. Pryor about the fire pit. And I just want to flesh that out a bit. You testified earlier that you were present when Tylee's remains were recovered,
Yes.
and you participated in that.
Yes.
We've talked about the fire pit. Are you familiar with what's been called a pet cemetery on that property?
Yes.
Overruled.
Can you explain to the jury, were any of Tylee's remains found in the pet cemetery?
So when I became involved, I don't know what the team had designated as cemetery and fire pit. So I can't testify to where exactly they had designated those points, but they were in that area that I assisted.
Did you become familiar with at least generally where the team was, what they were calling was the pet cemetery?
Sustained.
Did you receive any knowledge based upon what the team effort was, what had been designated by law enforcement there as what they were going to call the pet cemetery?
Mr. Wixom.
Judge, I'm asking based on his knowledge simply if he knew what law enforcement designated as that area.
Mr. Pryor, please enter the microphone.
Sure. And in response to that, that knowledge would only be obtained through hearsay. You know my objection, Your Honor.
What would be the exception, Mr. Wixom?
Judge, I'm not offering to prove it for the truth of the matter as to where the pet cemetery was. I'm simply asking this witness if he knew that area, generally speaking, as they were conducting their investigation for the remains, the area that they were calling that. But that's all.
Judge, and it's absolutely being asked for the truth of the matter asserted. That's exactly why he's asking it.
The objection's overruled. I find it as an exception to the hearsay rule, and the officer can answer the question.
I was familiar with the area called the pet cemetery.
And where was the pet cemetery in relation to the fire pit?
It was to the west and to the side a little bit, not very far away.
So in your earlier testimony, when you talked about the direction that Mr. Daybell was looking in the back of your patrol car, do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
And I think you testified you used the term fire pit.
Yes.
Can I just be clear for the jury? Was the pet cemetery in the same general direction as the fire pit where Mr. Daybell was looking?
Yes.
You were asked some questions about the use of shovels and tools in attempting to recover Tylee's remains.
Yes.
Could you explain a little bit more to the jury what kind of cautions and efforts were made to uncover those remains?
The majority of what I did, I was on my hands and knees with brushes and little hand tools, removing portions of dirt away from the mass that we had found.
Without being too graphic, when you were removing those portions of dirt, did you personally find any portion of her remains?
Yes.
Can you describe those remains that you'd found?
Judge, I'm going to object.
Basis.
He doesn't have the knowledge to identify remains, Judge. I haven't heard anything foundation-wise to allow him to make that kind of an assessment.
Well, on the objection, Mr. Wixom, he can testify to what he found. I don't know that there's enough foundation to accurately identify who was found.
Okay. Detective Wheeler, did you find what you believe to be human remains?
Yes.
Can you be specific about what you were finding?
We'd found a portion of a skull and started to uncover that. Then there was flesh and other bones. in a bucket, melted.
And at the time that the search was being conducted, were you aware of the names of the people whose remains they were looking for?
Yes.
What were those names?
JJ and Tylee.
At any point in time, besides the remains of Tylee and the remains of JJ, were any other human remains found on the property?
No.
So going back to the method and the manner that you used to recover these remains, you said, I think you said, you used a brush at points.
Brushes and hand tools
Why did you use those specific types of tools?
to try to keep what we were uncovering together without falling apart.
Not to be oversimplistic, but why is that important in this kind of a recovery in the ground of remains? Why do you need to do that?
I think it assists in identification purposes and evidence collecting so we don't lose anything.
Is it fair to say that that's a careful process?
Yes.
You were asked questions about passing off shovels or different shovels and tools. When you were engaged in this recovery of her remains and you observed other law enforcement, did you ever see anybody in any way haphazardly use those tools?
Judge, objection, mischaracterizing the question and the testimony.
Overruled.
I didn't see anybody using them. I don't know the word that you used. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Did you see anybody using them in any way that was haphazard or not cautious?
No.
So at no point when the remains were being recovered, did you see any conduct by law enforcement that wasn't conscientious and careful?
No.
I think you're a 17-year law enforcement veteran, is that correct?
18.
18, thank you. Are you familiar with the term consciousness of guilt?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. We're going well beyond the scope of cross-examination.
I'd like a quick sidebar. All right, thank you, counsel. After the sidebar, the court is sustaining the objection, and I'll move to strike that last question. So, Mr. Wixom, if you could ask a different question, please.
Thank you. Detective Wheeler, if someone gets in a car and flees quickly or appears to, what can that be indicative of?
Judge, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Could be that they have knowledge that something is going to be found or some sort of guilt.
Would that go back to that term, consciousness of guilt?
Judge, can we approach sidebar, please?
All right, after sidebar, the court is again striking that last question. Mr. Wixom, if you'd move on to another question, please.
Certainly. Just a last couple of questions. Can you explain again the timing of when Mr. Daybell had left the property and as to when you'd found out that JJ's remains had been found?
Later, I had discovered that it was simultaneously, meaning as Chad was leaving, detectives were coming around the house and saw him leaving and advised me to stop him.
Judge, I'm going to move to strike. It's hearsay.
Response, Mr. Wixom.
Your Honor, I can re-ask the question.
Very well.
Yep. When you had stopped Mr. Daybell and had him get out of the car and come back to the back, you indicated that that's when he was met by the 4 or 5 officers, including Lieutenant Ball. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
And we just saw the video where the first thing Lieutenant Ball said was, "We found JJ's remains."
Yes,
Would you agree with that?
yes.
That happened how long after Mr. Daybell had gotten his car and drove away?
Just prior.
Moments, seconds, what's your best recollection?
I wasn't back there, so I don't know the exact time they located him, but
I'm asking the statement from Lieutenant Ball to Chad,
right.
that timing, how long was that statement made to him? How much earlier had he driven away?
Oh, just within minutes.
And when you were there helping with Eileen's remains, I think you testified earlier that you weren't directly involved with the recovery of JJ's remains,
Correct.
but you were on scene and you made observations about that.
Yes.
Are you aware of whether or not, pursuant to that search warrant or the way the search was conducted, was law enforcement looking inside the house for remains?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I can't testify to that.
The whole time were you there, did you see any law enforcement going inside the house?
Just at the beginning when they made contact.
And then after that, did they all go outside?
Yes.
So as far as you are aware, all of the search was happening outside on the property.
Yes.
Is there any question that you have as to the direction that Chad was looking on your patrol cam when he looks back over his right shoulder? What direction was he looking?
Judge, that's a compound question, and he's asking an affirmation from this witness. I'm going to object.
Well, on the compound, it's sustained.
What direction was Chad looking when he was looking over his right shoulder in the patrol cam?
In the direction of the fire pit and pet cemetery.
You were asked about this several times by Mr. Pryor. Is there any question that regardless of what else he may have been able to see or look at, that general direction was right out the pet cemetery?
Judge, this has been asked and answered by counsel.
Sustained.
Thank
It's
you.
asked and answered.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right.
Judge, there were some issues that were brought up. I'd like the opportunity.
In limited scope, all out, Mr.
Thank you,
Pryor.
Your Honor. Now, Officer, I heard an interesting comment from you. As you were testifying, you made a comment that I subsequently learned. Did you talk to anybody about your testimony at the break in this case?
No,
You didn't talk to any other law enforcement?
no.
So when you said that you subsequently learned, when did that knowledge come to you?
What are you referencing?
I'm referencing the fact that you subsequently, now I forgot what the context of that was. We're going to move on, Judge. And it may come to me. I want to clarify a couple of things. When you say that Mr. Daybell left when he learned about finding remains on his property, was that when he was parked in the driveway?
In his residence?
Yeah.
When he left Emma's residence in his vehicle, shortly after I learned that JJ's body was found.
Okay, so and that's what I'm trying to clarify a little bit. So Mr. Daybell was parked in the driveway, then he went over to Emma's residence, and it's unclear, and I understand that we don't know whether he was there for an hour and a half or for 2 hours in Emma's residence, right?
Yes,
And at that point, he didn't know anything about anything being on the property that has been located by law enforcement at that point. Would you agree with that?
I don't know what he could see from there.
Okay, but he wasn't told by anybody that they found anything at that point, correct?
Not by me,
Right, or anybody else.
not that I know of.
Right. And then when he gets in his vehicle and he drives away, the prosecutor eloquently used the words fleeing, but we don't know what he was thinking at that point, do we?
No,
And only after he was stopped by you and those other several officers and notified what was going on, that's when he learned about it, after he drove away and after he had driven down the road, correct?
I can't testify to what he knew.
Okay, but he was told about the remains at that point. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
All right, I have nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right, that will conclude the testimony of this witness. Is this witness going to be recalled by either side?
I may recall him, Judge.
We may call him later by the state, Your Honor, but he can be excused for today as far as the state is concerned.
All right, well, Detective Wheeler, if you are to be recalled, again, you're still under an exclusionary order, so you are not permitted to view any of the footage of the trial, the testimony that's being live streamed, or discuss your testimony further until you return to testify. Otherwise, you may be excluded from testifying. So please keep that admonishment in mind in between now and when you may be recalled in the case. With that, then that will conclude this Detective Wheeler's testimony, and let me inquire from the state. Do you have another witness we can get started with before we take lunch?
No, we could. We could begin with Lieutenant Joe Powell.
Let's go ahead and get a next witness started and try to go till noon before we take lunch, please.
Do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you.
All right. Lieutenant Powell's been sworn. Before we get started with testimony, let me just indicate again, there's an exclusionary rule in this case. Lieutenant Powell, have you been observing any of the trial testimony in this case since it started?
No,
All right. Have you discussed anyone else's testimony that's come before you in the trial?
no.
All right. With that in mind, Mr. Wixom, then you can go ahead and inquire on direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Lieutenant Powell.
Good morning.
Will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Joseph Powell, Powell.
And where do you work?
Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
What is your lieutenant, correct?
Yes,
How long have you worked for that office?
22 years.
Have you ever worked as a law enforcement officer anywhere else?
No.
How long have you been a detective?
I was a detective for about 4.5 years.
What was your prior rank?
Patrol,
And have you been post-certified?
yes.
Could you briefly explain to the jury what that involves?
You go to the post academy. When I went through, it was 12 weeks of training.
Have you ever received any additional training or certification?
Yes, they require 40 hours every 2 years, so the continuing education.
So over the last 22 years, roughly 11 times you've had to get 40 hours of training.
That just went in effect, but yeah, there's lots of hours of training.
Did you get any specific training as a detective?
Yes,
And did you work as a detective prior to becoming a lieutenant?
yes.
How many years?
About 4.5 years.
I want to, well, first let me ask this. As a lieutenant, is it ever part of your role to become involved with unattended deaths?
Yes.
Could you just explain to the jury, what does that term mean, an unattended death?
There's nobody around when they wake up, they discover somebody's dead. There's nobody around to know what happened.
So why would law enforcement want to be involved and just look at that situation?
To see if there's any foul play.
I want to draw your attention back to nearly 5 years ago, back in October of 2019. Do you recall ever being involved in an unattended death of Tammy Daybell?
Yes, I was notified of her unattended death.
And who are you notified by?
Detective Mattingly,
Why did he notify you?
when there's an unattended death in Fremont, they notify the lieutenant, the chief deputy, and the sheriff.
What's the purpose to have your subordinates notify you about that?
So if there's any questions or they need help with the part of the investigation, and so the sheriff knows what's going on in the county.
Excuse me. What was the date of that? Do you recall?
October 19th, 2019.
At that point in time, what was your understanding as what the investigation had determined about Tammy's death?
Natural causes.
Shortly after the 19th of October, were you ever contacted by law enforcement from Gilbert, Arizona?
Yes,
And what date did that happen?
October 31st, 2019.
How were you contacted? Was it in person, by phone, email? How did,
I was contacted by phone.
and what did you learn from that contact?
They was inquiring about Tammy Daybell's death, asked if they could get a copy of the report, and asking for assistance.
Okay. Do you recall, did they say anything else about Tammy Daybell's death and the reason for their request for the report?
Judge, calls for hearsay.
Yes, sustained.
After the phone call, what did you decide to do in regard to Tammy Daybell's death?
I sent them a copy of the report.
And what about you personally? Did you take any steps to look at the case?
Yes, I reviewed the report, and then later on ended up getting her medical records.
Well, we'll pause here. So Gilbert, Arizona contacted you about Tammy Daybell's death.
Yes,
Did they request any other assistance or help with anything else?
yes, they asked to
Judge,
locate.
objection calls for hearsay.
Judge, a request isn't offered for the truth.
Overruled. You can answer.
They asked if we could help locate a 2018 gray Jeep Wrangler with Texas plates.
Did you get any information as to why you were seeking to locate that?
They believed that it was in Fremont County.
Did they tell you why they wanted to find the Jeep?
It was involved in an attempted shooting.
Did they give any names in terms of that were in connection with that shooting?
Yes, Alex Cox, Lori Vallow, and they believe they had ties to Chad Daybell.
Did the name Charles Vallow ever come up
I don't recall for sure.
at that time? You
At
don't
that
recall?
time.
So they asked you to look for a Jeep. What did you do next?
Drove out to, they gave me the address of 202 North, 1900 East. It's in Fremont County. So I drove out to that residence.
Did you determine who lived there?
Chad Daybell.
Did you find the Jeep?
No,
Do you recall what date it was that you drove out there?
October 31st, 2019.
What did you do after you determined that the Jeep wasn't there?
I notified Gilbert that we couldn't locate the Jeep there, and if they needed more assistance to let us know.
And did you in fact get more assistance from them?
Yes, the next day, November 1st, I received an email asking me to check a couple more addresses.
And did you do that?
One was a P.O. box in Sugar City, so I knew it was a post office, so I did not go there. But the next one was 565 Pioneer Road in Rexburg, and yes, we did go there.
And what did you find there?
We surveilled the residence, but never located the Jeep.
When you say surveilled, can you explain that a little bit more to the jury? What your
We-
process is?
We sat a ways away from the residence and watched it and watched for vehicles coming and going, people coming and going.
And did you observe anybody coming and going from that residence?
Yes,
Who did you observe?
Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow.
Prior to engaging in that surveillance, had you done anything to identify what Chad Daybell looked like?
Yes,
How did you do that?
driver's license photo.
Did you do the same for Lori Vallow?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
Gilbert, Arizona had sent a picture.
Did you eventually, let me withdraw that. Do you recognize Chad Daybell in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And what is he wearing?
Blue shirt and a yellow tie
Where is he seated?
at the defendant's table.
So you said at some point in your surveillance, you saw Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, is that correct?
Yes.
Explain to the jury when you first saw them.
First, we seen Chad Daybell leave the 565 Pioneer Road, and we surveilled him out to 202 North, 1900 East.
And Judge, if I could have some foundation as to time, date, place, year.
All right, Mr. Wixom, if you'd like to re-ask with more detail.
Sure. Lieutenant Powell, what date was it that we're talking about that you were surveilling and first see Chad and Lori?
November 1st, 2019.
These addresses that you were surveilling, where were they again?
One's in Madison County, and one would be in Fremont County in Idaho.
And which address was it that you first saw Chad and Lori at?
565 Pioneer Road in Madison County,
And what was the date that you saw them?
November 1st, 2019.
Recall what time of day that was?
I don't recall time.
Do you recall morning, afternoon, evening?
Morning.
Thank you. So, forgive me, I forgot where I left off, but what was it that you first saw them doing?
On the way down to surveil that, we also contacted Rexburg PD, so they was involved with the surveillance
Why did you do that?
because we was going to be in their jurisdiction.
Is that normal for law enforcement,
Yes,
just to touch base with each other?
yes,
Did they come and assist at all?
yes, they did.
So you made that contact, then what did you do?
We followed Chad Daybell from the 565 Pioneer Road to 202 North, 1900 East.
And what did they do at that location?
He went in the residence for a little while and then left. We surveilled him to Mountain America Credit Union in Rexburg, Idaho. And then we lost him after that, so we went back and surveilled the house again, the apartment.
Back that same day or a different day?
Same day.
About what time was it that you went back?
I don't know exact time. I'm guessing late morning.
What'd you see next?
We seen Lori Vallow leave and go to Sugar City to the post office
Anything else?
After there, she goes to Walgreens, and then after Walgreens, back to the apartment.
What did they do at the apartment?
Then they both go from the apartment to Idaho Falls. We surveil them to Mountain America, or the Mountain Credit Union in Idaho Falls, and then the Hobby Lobby, and then the Cafe Rio.
Excuse me. What did you observe them doing, if anything, at Hobby Lobby?
Holding hands as they was walking in the store.
And let me ask, did you take any photographs of that?
I did not.
Did any other law enforcement take photographs of that?
Yes,
Do you recall who it was?
I don't recall.
Did you later see the photographs?
Yes,
Do you believe that if shown, you might be able to recognize those?
yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer what's been marked as the state's Exhibit 36B. Got 2 copies for the court.
Judge, and I'm going to voice an objection for relevance. I'm not seeing the relevance here.
All right, if I could if I could view the exhibit, please, before I rule on the objection. Objection's been made. Mr. Wixom, as to relevance.
Judge, at this point, it goes to what's in the photo we believe shows the nature of the relationship, which isn't just relevant for this witness's testimony, but for the theory of the case overall. It helps to show the relationship between the two.
All right, I've considered the objection, given the nature of the conspiracy charges in the case, find there is relevance under 403, and will therefore overrule the objection, and the Exhibit 36B may be admitted.
Thank you. May I ask to have those handed to the witness, please? And Lieutenant Powell, even though these have been admitted, just to give context, what do you see in front of you?
Chad and Lori walking in the Hobby Lobby holding hands.
Mr. Wixom, I want to be clear. You're saying these, is there one exhibit or more than one?
I apologize. I handed 2 up to you. It's just one exhibit, 34 or 36B, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you bet. They were holding hands.
Yes,
So even though you didn't take this picture, do you believe that's an accurate reflection of what they were doing?
yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would request permission to publish this to the jury.
You may.
So Lieutenant Powell, if you'll please look at the monitor up there, this photo. Since we didn't all have your vantage point, will you just explain again what they were doing to the jury?
They're holding hands walking in the Hobby Lobby.
Were they holding hands the whole time walking in?
Yes.
Now, did you go inside the Hobby Lobby?
No, we did not.
What did you do while they were inside the Hobby Lobby?
Waited outside.
And how long do you believe they were in there?
I don't recall.
But did you wait long enough to see them exit the Hobby Lobby?
Yes.
And what did they do after that?
Got in their vehicle and drove over to Cafe Rio.
What happened then? Did they go inside?
Yes.
Did you happen to go inside?
Yes, myself and Chief Deputy Gardner went inside.
Did you observe them in there?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer State's Exhibit 35, which is already been stipulated to be admitted, but 2 copies for the court.
All right, I understand there is no objection then based on what Mr. Wixom has proffered on Exhibit 35. Is that correct, Mr. Pryor?
It is, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Exhibit 35 is admitted.
Here. Your Honor, may I have permission to publish it?
You may.
And before I do so, could I just confirm, Judge, was that last exhibit admitted? Did I move for admission?
It was 36B is admitted.
Thank you. What is that, a picture of, Lieutenant Powell?
Chad and Lori eating at Cafe Rio.
And did you observe anything else about their behavior or conduct together while they're at Cafe Rio?
No,
What happened after they left at Cafe Rio?
we ended the surveillance.
Why did you end it there?
The time of night and prior engagements people had.
Okay. Your Honor, it would now be an appropriate time to stop my direct examination, considering the hour.
Yes, let's go ahead and take our lunch break at this time. We will try to do it in an hour, back on at 1, but we'll allow sufficient time for the jurors also to have their lunch and take the break necessary. So we'll come back on after the break.
All rise, please.